Welcome to Lived In, the interior design podcast for ordinary people living in ordinary homes. It's season 4, and for the next few episodes, we'll be talking about how to think differently about our homes. Today's episode is all about what to do when your builder-grade home has no architecture. Let's get into it. Hey friends, I hope our last episode resonated with you all. My family and I actually all went to a used book sale a few weekends ago, and I got a great book. It's called Interior Design, An Introduction to Architectural Interiors, and it's by Arnold Friedman, John F. Pyle, and Forrest Wilson. And I'm mentioning this book because, I think it's technically a textbook, but it's great. I've been highlighting quotes on probably every other page so far. It's been very good. And there's a quote that really resonated. It said, "A good design must at least be a success in functional terms. This means, at base, that being functional will not guarantee that a design will be good, but that being non-functional will certainly make it bad." And I just think that so clearly demonstrates what we were talking about in the last episode. It's so good. Function has to come first. So with that said, today I really want to continue that conversation, and I wanted to start with something that I read from social media. So here we go, another quote. It was a caption for an image on social media posted by an interior design firm. And it said, "When designing, consideration of a building's architecture is essential for a successful transformation." So now we kind of have to get back to that book that I mentioned. It talked about the fact that houses are built without an architect. They're usually built by somebody who has no real connection to the design. They have no real connection to what it actually feels like to live in the space. It's typically houses today are built by a builder, not an architect, the majority. And if you remember my conversation last season with Toby Witter, we talked about that. And so, the truth is, for a lot of us, sadly, our homes are not designed by architects. And that includes me. My home was built by a builder without the help of an architect, probably using a plan that he purchased online with a primary focus on trends, not function. And so there isn't really an architecture for my home or in my home, and it's very likely that there isn't an architecture for your home. So when there isn't any architecture to consider, what should you do? What if you live in a new build home that doesn't have an architecture or a character that you can draw from? I think it's very interesting that as new builds continue to go up, there's such a giant chasm when it comes to the design style of these modern homes in Europe versus the United States. In Europe, what I typically see for modern homes, and when I say modern homes, I'm talking about homes built in the last 20 to 30 years, they tend to all have clean lines, be really white, very soulless. And the soullessness persists here in the US. It's the same thing here, but there aren't those same clean lines. There's kind of an imitation craftsman style that is pretty prevalent here in the US. And there are more curves than I think what you would typically see in a European new build. But it's still very clinical in terms of colouring and material choices. So, if you want to inject character into your soulless new build home, how do you do it? Friends, we're about to get into some of the principles that I give to my clients when they come to me looking for advice on how to make their homes their own. We are in a pretty tight economy, but you can do a lot more than you think with a small budget. For just $200, our one-on-one consultations show you how to create the home that you need with the budget that you have. You receive a detailed plan package with links and references to all items discussed during the initial consultation call, 2 additional follow-up calls, and unlimited email correspondence about your project. Our hope is to make it easy, affordable, and attainable to achieve a home that you can thrive in. For more information or to register for a consultation, click the link in the show notes. All right, so how do you inject character into your new build home? What if your home has no character and no architecture? Got a few points for you here. Get ready. The first one is work with what you've got. This, honestly, is the advice that I give to all of my clients. There is a starting point already. You don't have to erase everything, unlike the shows that you often see on television. Even if the existing design is terrible, there may still be something in the space that you could use as a jumping off point or still, keep an element of. This is especially important if you're trying to make your budget stretch as far as possible. And it requires you to really parse out what you're looking at in your space. So instead of looking at the whole and saying that you don't like it, break it down into pieces. Sometimes the pieces are great individually but don't work all together, or sometimes you only don't like something because of how it looks or functions next to something else. So, for example, in a kitchen, you might like the countertop in isolation, but paired with your cabinets, you don't like it. Or you might like your cabinets, but with the knobs, it feels very builder grade. Separate them all out. Countertops, flooring, lighting, cabinets, knobs, appliances, backsplash, paint color, ceiling color, etc. What functions well and what doesn't? What is beautiful and what is an eyesore? Once you know what probably can stay in the space, so what you can leave behind, you can begin to research the things that will work alongside those items, both in terms of function and in terms of aesthetics. So you pull all your ideas together and then you check in with your budget, of course, to see what is doable. So that was number 1, work with what you've got. Number 2, use the exterior as a reference. Now, I will say this only works if you're in a house and the exterior isn't terrible, obviously, or an apartment building with a very distinct style, so like a brutalist apartment or something similar. Again, if your house has no character or no architecture, you're probably limited there, and so that's not really going to work for you. But if you do have a house that has some sort of distinctive exterior, you can use it as a jumping off point. Now, again, it is a jumping off point, a reference point, so it's not something that should dictate your style, but there should be a relationship between the exterior design of the home and then what you experience when you walk inside. Again, not if you're in an apartment. That's going to be a bit different. But, for example, if your house is a single-story red brick home with a steeply pitched roof and it has the look of a gingerbread house, lean into that a little bit. You don't have to be cliche, but you can use that as a reference for what you do with the interior. So, number 1, start with what you've got. Number 2, use the exterior as a reference. Number 3, commit to a style. The blessing of architecture is that it offers cohesion. It provides a larger framework within which the interior choices can exist. It's like saying you're going to wear a specific pair of shoes, they're not going to work with the rest of your outfit if the rest of the outfit isn't tailored to work with that kind of shoe. So that's the same for architecture. And so when there isn't a clear architecture, it's much easier to end up with spaces that don't feel like they all work together. So what I'm saying is not that you have to commit to a style of furniture like 18th century French furniture everywhere. What I mean is that you need to commit to a specific design vernacular so that when you go from one room to the next, it's not a jarring experience because they are completely different styles. We don't want that. Now, even as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, do I really want to say this? Because I don't always like giving rules when it comes to design, because I think that there are always reasons to break design rules. But I do think that this, as a rule, matters greatly. It doesn't mean that you can't make one room really dark and saturated and another one light and airy. It just means that there needs to be a cohesion across the spaces so it still feels like the same house. You want every room to speak the same language, even if they have different voices. Now, I think one of the easiest ways to do this is to have a kind of red thread through the house. Right now, we're not talking about furnishings and decor. We're talking more about the things that don't move. So the walls, the doors, the cabinets, the floors, etc. To keep those cohesive, you could use the same knobs on all the interior doors. You could make the walls all the same texture. You could keep baseboards and crown molding the same style or even the same color. You don't have to, but you could. You could echo the same materials throughout the house, using the same flooring throughout, or just using the same material in a different way in each space. So, for example, if you're carrying walnut wood through every room in the house, maybe in one room it's on a wall, maybe in another room it's on the floor. You're using the same material just in different ways throughout the house. I hope you're keeping up. That was commit to a style. Number 4 is to change your finishes. And this is only when necessary. It's not always necessary. Some of the highest touch points in a new build home specifically are where you sense the new buildness the most, if you could say new buildness. I am talking about doorknobs, cabinet knobs, floors, faucets, countertops, appliances. That's where the builder tends to skimp versus splurge. Skimp, I think, is a very British term, but save versus splurge. There you go. And you don't need to replace it all. And in a lot of cases, if you're seeking a great return on the investment, you'll want to replace very little because you're just not going to see that money back. But changing those things allows you to add character in a way that is quite literally very tangible. You're going to feel it daily as you interact with your home. So you could use oil-rubbed bronze or polished nickel hardware instead of the brushed nickel that the builder uses everywhere. Or you could replace the thin greige carpet with something higher pile with more dynamic color running through it. You could upgrade from the standard stainless steel range to something with more detail, as long as it works functionality-wise, of course. And that kind of thing could make your space feel more lived in. And if you have very deep pockets, you could upgrade the molding throughout the home. And that really helps to add a sense of story. But again, be really careful about adding molding that really is jarring when it comes to the exterior architecture. All right, final point, and I will recap these at the end. Furnish with care. Half of the experience that we have when we are walking into a space is the furniture and the decor within it. Yes, you have the bones, you have the light. That typically is what I notice first. But when I'm in the space, the next things I notice are the furniture and decor. So your furniture is a huge opportunity for you to add and enhance character where it's lacking architecturally. It also is easier, I think, to work with furniture that is a different style when your house has no architecture. You can kind of use whatever style you'd like. So what you want to do when you're looking for items is to choose items that are dynamic and tell a story. You don't want items that are all the same period. You don't want items that are all the same color. You can mix wood colors, by the way. You don't want items that are all the same size or the same shape. It needs to be varied to be comfortable. You want to mix the modern chair with the heirloom desk. You want to add the colorful chairs in the living room with all the neutrals. You want to use a patterned rug. This is something I want to talk a bit more about at some point, but a good designer knows that having all of one thing feels very flat, becomes very one-dimensional. And so you need the tension of difference to create beauty. It's not something everybody instinctively knows how to do, which I 100% understand and sympathize with. However, I do think that with some careful study, it is something most people can learn to do. So multiple textures and materials, multiple colors, whether that is entirely different colors or simply different gradients of the same color, multiple shapes, multiple sizes, multiple genres, and multiple periods. Multiples make a space more interesting and welcoming. So, what were those again? To go through all of those again, it's number one, work with what you've got. Start with what the house is already giving you. Number two, use the exterior as a reference. You don't want it to be jarring to go from the outside to the inside. You want to feel like they're speaking the same language. Commit to a style. So speaking of language, making sure that all of the rooms are speaking that same language. Like I said, just different voices. Number four, change your finishes. Upgrade those high touch points, the knobs, the faucets, that kind of thing. And number five, furnish with care. Keep it interesting. Don't go for all the same tone, all the same height, all the same material, all the same color. Vary it a bit. Well, that's it for this week, but don't go yet. If you are in a new build home and you want to know how to create spaces in your home that have more character and feel more welcoming, then number one, make sure to check out the episode from season 2 with Jennifer Vreeland McDermott on how to make your build-a-grade home feel custom. It's linked in the show notes. And then number two, take a look at our interior advising consultations. They are a one-time cost and you get to talk with me about your home, your needs, your challenges, and your budget, and get the benefits of a full interior designer for a fraction of the cost. You can find all the information through the link in the show notes. Thank you for checking in with me this week on Lived In. We'll be back in 2 weeks to continue the conversation on how we can make our ordinary homes and ordinary lives more beautiful. See you then.